Hello, Virginia. I'm Liza Mickens, Maggie Walker's great-great-granddaughter, and I am honored to be a part of the VA Ratify ERA campaign to ensure Virginia is the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. I hope you've enjoyed today's film, filmed here in Virginia. While enjoyable, Iron-Jawed Angels omits some characters where it adds others. Since this is a historical campaign launch, let's start by correcting that history. The Washington Post cartoonist and love interest played by Patrick Dempsey is not real. His character helps to highlight Alice Paul's conscious decision to pursue rights instead of a family. The senator and his wife are also fictional. Miss Emily Leighton's character is a composite character representing the many women who worked for suffrage against the wishes of their families. Her character also highlights the unique position of women with connections to men in power. The jail scenes are generally accurate, except the force feedings were well known to the public, and the night of terror was worse than depicted. Lucy Burns was stripped naked and left chained until the next day. One suffragist was knocked unconscious, and another had a heart attack, believing her friend was dead. As you can imagine, the night of terror was a shock to the country and gained the suffrage movement much public sympathy. One omission from the movie is the role of men who supported the suffrage movement. It was minimized as to be nearly missing, when in fact, there were many men actively supporting the movement and participating in the parades and marches. The women's movement has always had and needed support from men, especially when you consider they cast the votes for legislation. The second significant omission is that the movie minimized the issue of segregation and racism in the suffrage movement. Considering that leaders in the movement knew each other from abolitionist activities, it is difficult to reconcile the origins of their relationships with the racism of the movement. Of the 8,000 participants in the 1913 march, the NAACP Journal, The Crisis, reported 43 women of color marching in the parade. At least 3, including Ida B. Wells, marched with their state's delegation rather than in the back of the parade as they had been instructed. Of the 43 women of color in the march, 22 were the founding members of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. The sorority was founded just 6 weeks prior at Howard University, and the 1913 march was their first public action. Although their action was omitted from this movie, it will be memorialized here in Virginia at the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial. For more information and links to explore the movie, please see the VA Ratify ERA website at VAratifyERA.org. After the 19th Amendment was added to the Constitution in 1920, women in Virginia began registering to vote. As you can imagine, there were some delays in the voting registration process, particularly for women of color. My great-great-grandmother used her power and privilege to call attention to these delays while also registering as many women of color to vote as possible. Discriminatory practices were used against women of color as well as poor white women, keeping voting for women at an all-time low. In 1920, in a state with 2.3 million citizens, only 13,000 women registered to vote. Women's participation in Virginia's election was one of the lowest in the nation, but you can be sure that my great-great-grandmother was one of those first women to exercise her right to vote. In 1921, just a year after casting her first vote, my great-great-grandmother was the first African-American woman to run for statewide elected office. Sadly, nearly 100 years later, she is still the only African-American woman to have run for statewide elected office. In that same 100 years, only one woman, Mary Sue Terry, has run for and won a statewide office. Despite our celebration today of the 19th Amendment being added to the Constitution in the 1920s, progress takes time, and it wasn't until the mid-1960s that all women were able to vote. Literacy tests and poll taxes disenfranchised women, particularly in southern states. All American women were finally enfranchised in the mid-60s, but it took the 24th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. After achieving these legislative victories, social progressives turned their attention to women's civil rights. They brought new energy to Alice Paul's Equal Rights Amendment, which finally passed Congress and was sent to the states in 1972. To paraphrase a civil rights icon in Virginia, Senator Henry Marsh, ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment is civil rights. So today, August 26, 2018, we kick off the statewide VAratifyERA campaign to ensure that Virginia is the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. We celebrate Alice Paul's tenacity and focus in achieving the right to vote and her genius in rewriting the Equal Rights Amendment to match the 19th Amendment. In 2017, led by Norfolk State University graduate Pat Spearman, Nevada became the 36th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Just 3 months ago, Illinois became the 37th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Now it's our turn, Virginia. We were not on the right side of history with the 19th Amendment or the 24th, but we can be with the Equal Rights Amendment. Some state will be the 38th to ratify, and it should be Virginia. Our beautiful state is the birthplace of American democracy. As we did with the Bill of Rights, let our Virginia ratification be the final vote to add important and necessary language to the United States Constitution. Let's do the right thing. Virginia, let's make history.